People that work in the wedding industry. Have you ever seen a couple and immediately thought this ends in divorce? Why? I'm a therapist and marriage counseling a lot of times is unfortunately divorce counseling. If your spouse talks about it, go. People wait way too long. I don't work in the industry, just have my own personal story. My boyfriend and I got invited to his female coworker's wedding. We used to go dancing with her while she was engaged. Her boyfriend was stationed on the East Coast. Her fiancé didn't take kindly to a male coworker showing up to the wedding that we were invited to, and I even went to her bridal shower, so the groom sent his dad to threaten my boyfriend into leaving because they work in the same industry I have connections. You'll never work in again. Even though he was retired, groom also refused to dance with the bride except for photos, and she loved to line dance, so she was crushed. All of us who cared about the bride knew her groom was just a shitty guy. They lasted a year. I've been right a few times for sure. Photographer here. One groom was so full of himself, but did that whatever you want. My queen thing, where he wants to be seen as this great guy, but really he's a self-absorbed dick. He was a chef, and ducking loved telling people that it was a quick engagement and marriage, and I got the feeling maybe too quick. The wedding and reception were to be at his parents' place, and his mom had a lot of input, as did his sister. The bride got shut down whenever she talked. On the day of the wedding, I arrived to shoot the bride getting ready. She is alone with the hair and makeup person. I initially thought that person was a friend, but she wasn't. Her bridesmaids were not there. 2 hours go by. She can't get a hold of them. The makeup person leaves. I help her put her veil on and do up her shoes. I'm feeling so bad for her, and also awkward as duck. This is supposed to be her big day, and here is basically a stranger putting her veil on and telling her she looks great. Finally, the bridesmaids come in. The maid of honor is the groom's sister. When the bride questions them, the sister says they went out for breakfast. The bride asks why they wouldn't tell her or bring her food, and they get pissy, like she's being Bridezilla. Then it comes out that the groom was invited for breakfast, along with the groomsmen, and they all had started drinking. It's only 11:30 am, and the bridal party is half lit. The kicker: none of the bridesmaids are dressed or have their hair or makeup done. The wedding is in 30 minutes. I get 0 photos of the bridesmaids. I run to shoot the groomsmen. They are doing shots. I get some great photos of them because they are drunk and all dressed up and feeling great. Wedding happens and that part is fine. We are supposed to go to a nearby beach and trail for photos. This never happens because the groom is literally talking to every person in attendance in the longest receiving line situation I have ever seen. He keeps drinking. The meal happens and takes forever. The sun is about to set. I tell the couple I literally have 0 photos of them alone together and we need to go. He says yeah after the speeches. He gets up to speak after several of his friends and his sister do 10-minute speeches, and he goes on and on and on. Most of it has nothing to do with his new bride. 30 minutes into his speech and the sun has set. He finally finishes, and I approach the bride. She just looks at me, defeated, and says, "You can just go home now." Groom was in the middle of a group of people, chugging a beer and laughing loudly, while his beautiful new bride sat alone, seemingly wondering what the duck she got herself into. I delivered the images and they didn't pay the remainder amount. I got a million excuses. After a month, I finally texted him and said I was going through small claims. The next day he sent an F with an angry message about hounding him and giving me a bad review. I saw her 6 months later at a restaurant, and before I could ask, she told me she left him. Saw him a few months ago working at a liquor store downtown. I guess being a chef didn't work out. A friend told me they know of him, and he got fired from 3 restaurants. He ignored me while he flirted hard with this woman. I shit you, not just before we left he said to her, "I'm off in 5 minutes. I'll walk with you to that store. I'll tell Charlie to put that delicious capsule aside for you." So smooth. Good luck, lady. Photographing the groom and you see his eyes light up when a guest arrives. You look over and it's a cute woman in a short dress. He smiles, walks up to the woman, picks her up, and swings her in his arms. Best smile I captured of the groom all day. Marriage didn't last 6 months from what I've heard. I have a friend who is a wedding photographer, a rather busy and expensive one at that. So people usually book a year in advance. So she had a bride book the wedding date and pay the deposit, nothing unusual there. The bride confirmed the venue also booked and pricey, and had the general discussions with her about the style that she wanted etc. They had regular meetings over the following months. But the groom was never there, a bit unusual, but not unheard of. So it's now 4 weeks before the wedding and they have the meeting to lock down all the details. But still no groom. My friend asks about him, and the bride mentions for the first time that she isn't engaged. Okay, maybe she has a long-term boyfriend and is planning a surprise wedding. No, it turns out that she doesn't have a boyfriend or any guy in mind. But she prayed about it, and God told her to trust that he will provide a groom for her. So, in the end, no groom magically materialized, and there was no wedding. So in that case, the marriage lasted 0 minutes and we were all sure that it wasn't going to work out. In fact, at the time we had some running jokes about her meeting a guy on a date and asking him if he wants to go to a wedding with her next weekend. At a wedding, when the I-dos came, the groom said, "I guess." Used to do wedding jing. Went to a storage room to grab some gear and walked in on the bride going down on the best man. I immediately closed the door, then thought, wait, did that just happen? And opened again to see the best man look like deer in headlights. I slammed the door again and went back to my post for the night. My coworker said, "Don't say a ducking word. We don't get paid to get involved. Just collect the check and keep playing music." I wish I had a free award to give you for the laugh I got out of you opening the door a second time to make sure it actually happened. Lol. I remember a wedding that I worked catering for that involved the groom getting rather handsy with the maid of honor during the reception. Both were drunk and a bit too close. The bride was on the dance floor flopping around drunk off her ass to a point of having to be escorted to a restroom to freshen up. Honestly, it always seems when the bridegroom get trashed during the reception, something happens that will cause them to split shortly after. Not always, but it's just something I noticed during the weddings I have assisted with. I'm a musician and the son of a wedding photographer. I've actually played in a band whose leader, on the wedding day, took a deposit for the divorce party that was to follow. The groom's mother laid it down and said I'd give it 6 months. 9 months later, there we were, and there she, the bride, wasn't. Was at a friend's wedding once. It was at the Justice of the Peace, when the judge or officiant came around to, if anyone doesn't believe in the union, to speak up or forever hold your peace. A loud "oh" came shrieking from the back. It was my friend's 2-year-old son. Everybody was joking, saying it was a sign. Less than a year later the couple got divorced. It was the 3rd time the bride had hired me and all the guys had been carbon copies. When the bride and groom argued over why the groom's mother shouldn't get all money given to them on their wedding day, yeah, that was a red flag. They had a big fight the night before the wedding and were considering calling it off until the bride showed up 30 minutes before the ceremony. No one was sure if she would be there at all. The groom danced with his mom more times than he did with the bride. The bride was snippy and nitpicky with the staff all night. The word annulment was cast around, and I hope to God they went through with it the next day, because holy shit. Used to moonlight as a musician for hire in college, and did more than a few weddings. Saw many that raised an eyebrow, but the 2 that really stood out as rough. Groom was super emotional and smiling when the bride first appeared at the church doors to walk down the aisle, and the bride was more interested in hollering at her family and friends as she made her way down the aisle. I don't think she looked at the groom once on her way down. You just saw his face drop as she got closer, and had no interest in even looking at the man she was about to marry. The other, I had heard from the wedding planner that the bride and her bridesmaids had gone through at least 10 bottles of champagne throughout the morning, and all were ridiculously drunk, and to keep playing, no matter what happens. Well, 2 of the 3 bridesmaids fell and had trouble getting up on the way down the aisle. The bride and the maid of honor made it down the aisle, but had great difficulty. The groom basically was holding the bride up for the entirety of the ceremony, and she very loudly refused a chair. Also, the flower girl looked a little green around the gills and threw up into her basket during the vows. I guess she was either given or sneaked some champagne as well. Wedding planner said they had argued the night before over whether they were going to drink before the wedding. Groom wanted to stay sober until the reception. Bride disagreed, ran into the planner at another wedding, and she said they had a massive fight in the limo on the way to take pictures, which the bride side of the wedding party was in no shape to participate in, so they skipped them. Photographer ended up doing a goofy shoot with the groomsmen, since they had already paid for photos. Bride and bridesmaids sat in the limo drinking more, showed up to the reception, and the bride was passed out. Groom made an apology speech to the guests, and got an Uber home, alone. On a nicer note, I was playing in a church that was not air conditioned in the middle of August, and the bride passed out from the heat. Groom caught her, laid her down super gently, ran and got her chair while someone got her some orange juice, and did the entire ceremony with her in the chair, and him on one knee next to her. Was super sweet, and she cried the entire time. Another time, someone actually did try to do the speak now or forever hold your peace, and the bride whips around, cuts the guy off, and says for the final time, "No, I never have or never will want to be with you. Shut up and let me get married." Kisses her groom on the cheek, and says cheerfully, "Now let's get married." Wasn't able to get any background details on that one though. Many years ago I had a side hustle doing cakes, and would often get orders for wedding cakes. Long story short, the bride-to-be threw a full-fledged stumpy-footed tantrum, locking herself in my bathroom, and refused to come out because the groom was unreasonably insisting on having a say in what the cake flavor was going to be. Like, I'd say through the door, "Get out of my bathroom," and all I'd get was a whinny defiant little no. I think she was about 22. A few times as a photographer, the couple were usually fine. The families themselves were too different and combative. I don't work in the wedding industry, but I have a depressing wedding story. I have a friend who I grew up with. She was always gorgeous and incredibly popular with guys, and I always thought she was a great person. As I got older I came to realize she was actually extremely toxic in relationships, and did better when she was single. She had been seeing a new guy for 2 months when one day I receive a wedding invitation in the mail. Knowing her history, it was a massive red flag for me. I turn up to the wedding and it's at a gorgeous little backyard type wedding. It's spring and everything looks perfect. I greet her family and it's like I've turned up to a funeral, not a wedding. They're all extremely solemn, and when I ask about the groom her mother rolls her eyes and says this: "It's a mistake." Wedding commences, and as the bride comes down the aisle her face is grey and like she would rather be anywhere else. They exchange vows while the bride does everything in her power to not touch her husband-to-be, even standing a solid meter away from him as they stand at the front. She actually cringes and looks away when he gets choked up saying how much he loves her. When the priest announces the kiss, the bride takes a slow step forward and presents her cheek for him to kiss instead of her lips. No one cheers. It's just an awkward shuffling of feet and a few scattered claps. It was the worst wedding I've ever been to. They lasted about 3 months before separating. Heard from a friend who did calligraphy that a bride came to get wedding invites, and the usual wording of bride mum and dad and groom mum and dad invite you to the wedding of bride and groom. Bride didn't want groom's parents' names on the invite. My mate did an invite mock-up, called the couple for a check, and the groom lost it. Because groom's parents were the ones paying for most of the wedding, they didn't need any invites. I'm a photographer and I've shot 3 weddings BC. I hate them, and they are not for me. Bless you guys who do it, but it's too much work and drama for me, and not worth the money. Anyway, one of the weddings, the groom called the bride unattractive. She was stunning and used to model, was maybe a size 2, and he was cute, but generic cute. He kept taking shots of vodka with his boys and asked for a full-on photo shoot with his mom. He was definitely a mama's boy. BC mom was hovering But you know it's bad when mom suggests that he maybe take some photos with his wife. He told me to stfu every time I redirected. So after the third time that happened and he flashed me his junk, I started packing up. When he started yelling at me, I just told him no one talks to me like that and I'd send them a refund. I knew right then that it wouldn't last. He started crying and said he'd behave. He did. But it didn't matter. BC 2 weeks later the marriage was annulled. No one wanted the photos. I was paid in full for photos no one wanted. Bride's dad had paid me and tipped me well too. When I offered to refund him half anyway, he said the bride knew when the groom yelled at me and cried that it wasn't going to work. So I earned it. I guess the whole fam was trying to get them to call it off. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.